Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman Varenga, Chairman Bradley, ranking members, Sredzinski, who's just sneaking out when I sit down, and ranking member Senator Wong. You have my submitted testimony, so I've never stayed this late for a public hearing, which is an indication of how strongly I feel about this issue. I don't think our tribal partners could have a better advocate than Senator Alston, but I will bring to you my perspective. She mentioned one of my favorite statistics, and not in a happy way, that Eastern Connecticut, up until recently, had the 9th worst recovery in the country when you're looking at the labor market. Absent our tribal partners, I don't like to think what would have happened to our part of the state. We saw drastic downsizing at Pfizer, excellent paying jobs. We are still looking at Fort Trumbull, undeveloped. Pfizer left the minute they lost their tax abatement. Electric Boat was not the thriving enterprise it is now. Defense contracting for submarines had tanked. So the casinos, our tribal partners, played such a huge role in at least keeping our heads above water. And I don't think that's something I personally, nor I think the state, should be willing to overlook. Senator Austin mentioned their philanthropic endeavors. I was speaking to a constituent just this past weekend who's very involved in charities for wounded warriors, and he was thrilled to report that Foxwoods was letting them have the use of the Grand Ballroom without charge. I know the Mohegans, I have a local, in fact, my Parks and Rec director is trying to build a baseball and totally handicapped accessible field using no municipal funds. The Mohegans granted him the use of one of their ballrooms free of charge. I could go on all day about the part they played in my community. And I listened to some of the other testimony, and I'm not going to cast aspersions, but I find it hard to take seriously an organization that denied vociferously that there was any interest in developing a casino in Yonkers during the last session while they were pushing a casino in Bridgeport, and then read in November that they paid $850 million for Yonkers. And I guess my final word on this, the revenue is important. I don't want to see that go away. But what's more important to me is respect and honor. We have two tribes, two sovereign nations that entered in an agreement with this state, have honored it, have said they will continue to honor it, whatever happens. And the idea that we, as a state, would not offer them the equal honor and respect that they are due, I would hate to see us betray our indigenous people again. And I view it in that way. So thank you so much for your time. As you can see, I feel strongly about this. I was so pleased that we had reached a bipartisan decision. I hope we can going forward, because we all want what's best for the state. But don't forget my part of the state. I sometimes jokingly say Eastern Connecticut is our equivalent of flyover country. Please remember that we're there, and we count too, and remember our partners who helped us survive. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Austin.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for coming today, Representative Cheeseman. It's really a pleasure to see you here. We've talked often about our tribal nations and our partners in economic development in Eastern Connecticut, and you and I both recognize how hard it's been. I've seen you at many Workforce Investment Board meetings, and you said it so eloquently. It's truly about the respect of our partners who have been here for hundreds of years and who we have had an agreement with, and signed that agreement. And I'm hoping also that your words to everyone will ring so true that we will not break that agreement with our indigenous tribes. Can you talk a little bit about the tourism area of Eastern Connecticut, and a little bit about the museums that we have down along the shore that provide small amounts of economic development in our tiny communities.
I'd be happy to. I think one of the pluses, and people tend to overlook this, is that people who are coming to those casinos and tribal destinations are not always spending all their time there. If you look at our part of the state, we have everything ranging from the Mystic Seaport, the Mystic Aquarium, the Mystic Art Association, to historic houses in my town. I hope that was a plug for I'm executive director of the Children's Museum in Niantic as my full-time job. The Nautilus Museum. We have a huge range of museums and other tourist attractions that complement what is offered by the tribes at their casinos.
There are many things that our tribal nations act as partners with in Eastern Connecticut. I believe they also sit on the Workforce Investment Board, the Eastern Advanced Manufacturing Alliance, our Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments sector. All of the economic drivers include representatives from our tribal nations. In your meeting with them, how have those representations gone forward?
I think they recognize they're an integral part of the community. The people, yes, they have their employees, but their employees have family members, sons and daughters, wives, husbands, children, who also need employment. And they want to see our community do well. I mean, I know they've partnered with the Tourism Coalition. Foxwoods, in fact, provided money. They have created, in effect, a series of online modules for people in the hospitality and tourism industry to provide the people working with the customers with the best training possible. And my understanding is they put a significant investment in that because it's in their interest for everyone to do well.
And you mentioned the labor market standing, and the New London labor market standing was 9th worst in the country. There was no other labor market that was mentioned in Connecticut as being 9th worst in the country. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, and that was a point I often made in stressing the needs of our particular part of the state. My line was, not Connecticut, not New England, not the Northeast, 9th worst in the country. And unless you were there at that time and saw the continual bleed of jobs and good paying careers, I don't think you had any idea. The numbers of foreclosures, the real toll it took on the region. It's easy to look at the forests and the seacoast and you think, oh well, this is a wonderful prospering part of the state. It wasn't. I mean, we're very fortunate now with the jobs pipeline coming through EB, and our economy for a change is actually doing better than many parts of the state. But for many, many years, that wasn't the case.
Representative Cheeseman, I really thank you for all the work you do for Eastern Connecticut, for recognizing where we are, what we are going to do together. You're an integral part of our coalition, bipartisan, bicameral, working together to make sure that people don't forget Eastern Connecticut as they have for a very long time. Thank you very much for coming and staying so late today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Senator Bradley.
Just briefly, ma'am, and bless you. And I don't like to pin region against region, as I think I've stated in passing. And I obviously have to say something here for my beloved city of Bridgeport. 55% of our property is in the hands of nonprofit. That means every time that the state of Connecticut wanted to build a juvenile detention facility, it gets built in Bridgeport. Every time we wanted to build a prison or a government facility, it gets built in Bridgeport. Have you ever been to our downtown in the city of Bridgeport?
I actually have.
And so you know You can literally film the destruction of Damascus and use Bridgeport as the background shot for that movie. It's desolate. It is the worst downtown in the entire state. Now consider that when we are part of Fairfield County, per capita, the home of more billionaires than anywhere else in the United States. So when you talk about the eastern part of Connecticut, which I know has also gone through those hardships, you talk about the jobs that have been deprived, you talk about all these opportunities that have been lost, that's an isolated part of the state of Connecticut from what I've heard testimony from. We're part of the most affluent part of our nation, and we have places where, have you ever been down Stratford Avenue in Bridgeport, Connecticut? It's in the east end of Bridgeport.
I don't know.
Or Connecticut Avenue. We're right now almost at 10 murders in the city of Bridgeport, and the year just started. We're month 2 now in 2019. Absolutely decimated industry, absolute economic isolation. All we're asking for, and I know as a woman who's fair and understands equity, is for a bidding process that would be fair and transparent, and that we as legislators look at what makes the most sense in terms of generating revenue. That's it. It's not necessarily saying that Bridgeport deserves it because we're in tough shape, or that the tribes deserve it because they've been victimized in years past. We're simply saying what makes sense for all of us sitting at this table to make sure that nutmeggers are getting the greatest bang for their buck. Would you support something like that?
I suppose my feeling is we have an agreement. And what is the point of having an open and transparent RFP if at the end of the day if you're not going to have the option of selecting someone other than our tribal partners, why are you even having an RFP? And I don't live in Bridgeport, but I can share your frustration. And I would work hand in hand with you to bring initiatives to Bridgeport that would provide the people who live there and their children and their families with the opportunity to have the good paying jobs and careers that they deserve and they need. The senator mentioned the Eastern Workforce Investment Board. I have seen what they have done in the local high schools, working hand in hand. I would want to bring that sort of initiative to Bridgeport, to work with your young people, your young men and your young women, talking to them in the middle schools, showing them that there are all these, how far are you from the Sikorsky and Pratt and Whitney? You know, you are in an area where there is so much advanced manufacturing. That's what I would like to do to Bridgeport, and bring those sort of initiatives and those sort of moves that really give you a future, and not, again, pit region against region, because I do feel if you're going to enter an RFP, why are you doing it if you're not entertaining the possibility of not picking your tribal partners?
I'm just going to make 2 points, respectfully, Representative. One is that for the years that I've been living in the city of Bridgeport and studying about the politics of the city of Bridgeport and understanding the economics of the city of Bridgeport, do you know how many times this legislature or legislatures of years past have proposed that? Maybe it's been proposed. How many times it's been executed? Never. So here we have a corporation who's looking to generate private money during a time when we have fiscal responsibilities, where we're in a very tight fiscal situation, who's willing to bring private dollars to investment. And all we're saying is we want to see if the dollars add up. And if it doesn't add up, it doesn't make sense for any of us to approve it. That's what we're saying. And my frustration is we are all here, first and foremost, American citizens, and first and foremost put our country before anything else. And secondly, obviously, residents living in the state of Connecticut, nutmeggers. Why would we not look first at the interests of the state of Connecticut and the taxpayers of the city, and first consider the exclusive right of what you described as a sovereign nation? Why are we putting their interests before the interests of the rest of us?
Because I don't think we're putting their interests before. I think we're putting our sense of honor and respect on the line. And I think having made an agreement, having reached that decision, it behooves us to keep it. But again, I am sincere about this, Senator Bradley. There should be no one in this state who lives in a community where there are murders like that. There should be no one in this state who feels they have no future. If that is the case, then we as a legislature, we as human beings are not doing the right thing. Sorry, I'm getting emotional here. But I do feel strongly about this, that we should be able to come up with a decision that honors agreements we've made in the past, but also helps the people to whom you have to answer.
Correct. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Nope. And I want to thank you for staying so late. It really shows that this issue is very important to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure and an honor as always.
Thank you.